Hi everybody, welcome back to the Intercooler podcast with me, Dan Prosser and Andrew Frankel. This is episode 229. Lots of things that we want to discuss this week. Andrew, before we get started,
yes,
a quick thank you to everybody who has subscribed using the podcast listener discount code. We mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and lots of you have used it. So sincerely, thanks to all of you for using that coupon code. Now, if you don't know, we're offering podcast listeners a 15% discount on the cost of a subscription to the Intercooler. Now, if you like what we do, if you listen to this podcast most weeks, you appreciate what we do and you want to support us, subscribing to the Apple website is far and away the best way.
Yeah, and to people who are going, at website, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So yes, we're not just a podcast.
No.
We publish a ad-free digital car magazine. It lives on the website and app. We publish new articles every day of the working week. We have what is undoubtedly the best team of automotive writers working anywhere in the world today.
The greatest team. And we have said this time and again, and nobody has ever questioned it. It is the greatest team of people, because it's not just journalists like us. It's writers, it's engineers, it's drivers, it's designers. Every day, one of us posts a new bespoke original story on the website and the app. And those who do subscribe love it. So maybe consider adding your name to their number, because it's how you can help us do more of this.
Yeah, so you support the show, but you also get full access to everything that we've ever published on our magazine. It's all there.
And there are, I don't know how many stories there are.
It's 2 million words now.
It's 2 million words. Yeah. And how many stories are we up to?
1,100, 1,200, something like that.
Yeah, so there's enough stuff already there just to keep you occupied for days, months, years, as long as you like, really.
Yeah.
And it's all there in the library, ready for you, as well as every single working day, a brand new story by some of the best people in our industry.
And so we're offering you a 15% discount. Just head to the-intercooler.com. I'll also put a link in the description, and use the coupon code POD15 at checkout, and you'll get 15% off. So please do that. Thank you ever so much to everyone who has done already, and to all of you who will go on and do that. So let's move it on then.
Yeah.
A few things we want to discuss. A little bit of F1. Yesterday was the Baku Grand Prix, Azerbaijan. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details of it all, but the sort of takeaways are Oscar Piastri, to me, looks a future world champion. And I've thought this for a while.
Yeah.
And McLaren now lead the Constructors' Championship for the first time in, I think it's a decade or whatever.
What would have happened if they hadn't messed up quali and Lando had been up there with him?
It's interesting, isn't it?
I absolutely take nothing away from Piastri's race, because I think the overtake,
that lunge,
was a superb piece of driving, and the way he fended off, because he's still pretty new to that game, and up against some pretty experienced the way he just kept them at bay lap after lap, despite that. Is that straight the longest straight in Formula One?
Oh, it's got to be up there.
It's 2.2 kilometres, isn't it?
Yeah.
And with a massive DRS effect, and he still fended them off, and eventually buggered off into the distance. When Charles' tyres got shot, he actually won quite easily in the end. So I thought that was a masterly piece of driving. I'm not even questioning it. The only thing I sort of wonder slightly is, Lando tends to out-qualify Oscar. And if he hadn't messed it up, or hadn't messed up for him in Quali 1, I think it would have been a 1-2, wouldn't it? But what order it would have come in is another matter.
Do you know what? I really rate Piastri. I think now that he's got a year and a half or close to 2 years underneath his belt in F1, I think Lando is going to have his hands full with Oscar Piastri next season.
I hope so, because I think what you then get is they push each other, don't they?
Yeah.
It's like any sport where you're up against someone who is as good or maybe even a bit better than you. You raise your game, don't you?
In his debut year last season, Piastri won a sprint and he got 2 podiums.
Yeah.
And I said last year, I think it was the best rookie season since Hamilton in 2007.
Wow.
And it's hard to be absolutely certain about these things because normally a rookie comes in a midfield or a back of the grid car, and so you never really know how good, how well they are driving. But certainly in terms of success, points, podiums, it's the best since Hamilton. I think he's a superstar. Now, the sort of rumour mill is that even though Red Bull ultimately had a shocker yesterday, with Sainz and Perez crashing right at the end of the race, Max only finishing 5th, he was running 7th before they crashed out. People are saying that they have made a step forward, and once we get to the more conventional circuits, and the next race,
other side of Singapore.
Yeah, Singapore is not one of those.
No.
They are likely to be back on form. If that's the case, and if we've had several Grand Prix with Max really struggling, and Lando has not been knocking out the victories the way he needed to keep his slim hopes of winning a maiden championship alive.
Yeah. Actually, I think Lando was one of the stars of the show, even though, where did he come in the end? 5th?
Well, fourth. Yeah, fourth.
Yeah. Given where he started.
I know, but Max and Red Bull have really been off the boil for whatever reason. Yeah, and he hasn't capitalised. He has not.
And what is the evidence that Red Bull have sorted their problems out and are going to come back?
Well, Perez was fighting for a podium.
Yeah, but it's a very particular sort of circuit, isn't it? And we know that Checo is really good on street circuits.
Yeah, and he's good at Baku. He was genuinely quicker than Max last season.
I don't think you can look at and think, well,
no. But people who really dig deep into these things have said, and talking to the team and looking at digging deep into the data, there is enough or some evidence to suggest that car is back on track. They made an upgrade for Baku. Okay,
so back on track means it's in a different league to anything else out there. I would be amazed,
or at least more competitive than it has been.
More competitive, that I can see. Yeah. But the way it was at the start of the season, if they've managed to find out,
they won't get back to that.
No, I don't see it. I think you're right. I think that Lando's chances of becoming world champion, I don't think they're even in his hands anymore. I think he actually requires some bad luck to befall.
I think so.
Max. And the other problem is that he could well find himself in situations like he was at the weekend, where because there are so many. Ferraris are competitive now. Obviously, Oscar is super competitive, and one slip, and that's points taken from him in a vital. That he needs every point he can get. So, I think McLaren will win the constructors.
Oh, I think there's no doubt about it.
But I think Max will still be world champion.
Yeah, for me, the Drivers' Championship, Singapore, the next race, is a big deal there, because Red Bull had a shocker last season.
Yeah.
If Lando can win that, outscore Max by 15 points or something, maybe it is game on. But if Lando doesn't capitalise on that advantage, and the Red Bull does come strong on the more conventional circuits that are to come.
That's the thing, isn't it? You can't read too much into either Baku or Singapore because they're not representative, and I think there's 7 races remaining.
I think so, yeah.
So that's 6 after Singapore, 6 on circuits which you would say would more traditionally play to the Red Bull strengths. I think it's going to be tough. Just while we're on it, and we mustn't talk too long about Formula 1, but we've been talking about rookies. Colapinto and Behrman.
Yeah.
Behrman.
Yeah.
Promising.
Did they both score points?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Both in their second Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure I'd heard of Colapinto before he made his debut last time out. But he looked quick.
He looked quick. He looked very convincing. And Behrman, and we know he is quality from his that one race he did in the Ferrari.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a shame that he's not going to see out the rest of the season. It was a one hit only for him, but he clearly is quality, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's not going to struggle for a drive.
Oh, do you know what? There was a time where we all wanted to get the 24 and 25 seasons out of the way.
Yeah.
But 25 now is looking
could be really interesting,
bloody exciting.
Yeah.
So we've got Lewis and Charles at Ferrari. We've got Kimi Antonelli joining George at Mercedes.
Yeah.
And people talk about him like he's the second coming. We shall see.
We shall see.
Behrman. What else have we got? We've got Sainz moving. There's just all sorts of intrigue. And I actually can't wait to see that season.
Lewis had a very quiet weekend, didn't he?
Yeah.
Starting from the pit lane.
Yeah.
And that I think he did get into the points in the end, didn't he? Because Sainz and
ninth
and Checo crashed, but he wouldn't have got it. He would have had a wasted weekend, but had those two not come together.
He was running half a second behind, I think, Colapinto.
Yeah. With
a couple of laps to go, so he may well have got DRS past him. But whatever, Actually, if you listen to or read anything, read what he was saying after the race, there was a problem with the car. And you watch how he was driving it. He was having to do all sorts of bizarre things just to try and get that thing. That the car wasn't right. Do you know, this is the most intriguing thing for me now about next year. His qualifying has been shocking. The strange thing about George and Lewis is that Lewis, after their first two seasons together, Lewis was slightly ahead in the qualifying head-to-head.
Yeah.
This season comes, and George has just run off into the distance.
And who do you rate as a better driver, George or Charles?
Charles.
So what's that going to mean next year?
Well, see,
when Lewis joins a team that's been built around Charles.
Yeah, but I'll go on the record here and say he will be fully competitive with Charles in qualifying. There's something going on. You know, he's got.
I would love that to be true, but I don't believe it.
Okay, well, we'll revisit this. He's got more poles than anyone. He was ahead of George up until a few months ago.
Yeah, but the whole point is that nobody doubts that Lewis was the greatest driver of his generation, certainly pre-Max. Nobody doubts that. I think what people question is whether that Lewis is still out there.
But he was there last year. What's changed over winter?
We'll see.
I think there's something going on. I think that I do think there's something. I know that's very tin hattish, but tinfoil hat. But whatever. This is why next season is so intriguing. Yeah. You know, it's a reset. It mixes it up. There are new driver pairings, new teams. It's just going to be brilliant to see. But before then, we've got a run in for the remainder of this season.
Well, let's hope.
Which looks really exciting.
Let's hope.
It could be, couldn't it? It could be really special. So let's just stick with F1, but change subject a bit. Newey to Aston.
Yeah.
At which point did you sort of believe that was happening? Because the rumour mill has been going for a while.
With Adrian, you can never be completely certain until you can put the ink on the contract, and even there's not certain. Let's not forget that Jaguar were so confident that they had him, they put out the press release. And then Ron
that's amazing.
And then Ron had a quiet word, and it turned out that they didn't. So, when it became clear to me, and I always thought it was just a bit unlikely that at age 65 that Adrian was going to go and live in Italy. I just, I didn't really see it. And I thought if he was ever going to do anything like that, he'd do something like John Barnard did in the 90s and establish a Ferrari F1 design base in the UK and run it remotely from there. And I didn't really see Ferrari going for that. So I never thought that Ferrari was... I mean, I know that he always wanted to work with Lewis, and I'm sure that was a big draw. But the moment it was clear he wasn't going to do that, Aston became the next most likely. If you just think about the teams, where they are, their trajectories, the aspirations, the resources, and you've got Lawrence Stroll with that very impressive new facility, the most state-of-the-art wind tunnel in Formula One about to come online, with Fernando based in the UK. I think of if Adrian was going to stay in F1, I think there was genuinely a question. I think he genuinely didn't know when he handed in his notice at Red Bull whether he was going to stay or not. But once it was clear that he was, I think that Aston then was always going to be the most likely destination. Even though I can remember Lawrence Stroll telling me not that long ago that he and Adrian had conversations and he'd done his best but failed, and that Adrian Newey was definitely not going to Aston Martin. And that wasn't games. At the time when he said it, it was absolutely true. So it's his second bite, and this time it's come good.
So the reports say the deal is worth up to 150 million.
Because there's equity
over 5 years. Yeah, he becomes a partner in the team, and he says it's the package, or he says not the financial package that drew me.
Yeah.
So, the things about how he works, the structure of the team underneath him, all these things are important to him.
Yeah.
But
I saw one report saying that he could become, on paper, the world's first F1 designer billionaire.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's true or not. What I am sure about, I don't know Adrian well, but I know him a little bit, is that his ambition will be entirely performance-based. I'm sure, like all of us, we like to be recognised and rewarded for the work that we do. But I don't think that he's sitting there, rubbing his hands together and seeing dollar signs. I just don't think that's motivating him at all.
I don't think so.
I think he wants to prove that he can do it again in his mid-60s. He is still the man who can get the team together around him and deliver championship-winning cars or multiple championship-winning cars. I'm sure that ultimately that is what, rightly or wrongly, Lawrence Stroll has been able to convince him of.
The curious paradox about Lawrence Stroll is that he has pumped an enormous amount of money. Maybe it's not his own money, but an enormous amount of money has gone into the Aston Martin team.
Yeah.
New factory. It's an amazing facility. New state-of-the-art wind tunnel.
Yeah.
Adrian Newey.
Yeah.
He's thrown everything at turning that into a championship winning team.
I know where you're going with this. I know where you're going with this.
And yet the second driver is Lance Stroll, his son. Maybe he's just a big softie, ultimately, Lawrence Stroll, and he just wants his boy to do well.
Okay, I know what the answer to this is already, but I'm going to ask. Checo Perez or Lance Stroll?
Well, Perez is a step above, isn't he, as a driver?
I don't know.
Oh, I think he is.
Okay, I'm no apologist for Lance Stroll at all, but I don't think he's someone who doesn't deserve to be in Formula One. All other issues aside, I think he is good enough and quick enough to earn his place on that grid. I don't think he is a Mazepin type character.
No. He's had a pole, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, okay, probably quite a fortuitous one.
And a few podiums as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and he's out-qualified Fernando.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You don't do that if you're a bit of an idiot who's only there because daddy's rich.
No, I agree. I agree.
So, at the same time, if what Lawrence Stroll wants, and it must be, is for Aston Martin to win Constructors' Championships, it's very hard to do, as Red Bull will find out this year, to do that if you've only got one superstar.
Yeah, and the other teams that you're up against typically have two fantastic drivers.
All of them.
So it's very, very... Yeah, it's the most interesting point for me about the whole Aston Martin setup is that they have all this ambition, and yet Lance Stroll, who does not sit at the top table, is seemingly immovable from that seat.
Yeah. Would you not... because I think he is good enough, for instance, to really shine in WEC, maybe in IndyCars. I think there are all sorts of other forms of motorsport in which he could be... fantastic. But I guess Aston Martin doesn't have any representation there, and it's not the pinnacle.
If they manage to build a winning car quite soon, or at least a very competitive car, the questions will grow louder and louder and louder if Lance is not able to keep the pace with whoever his teammate is.
Yeah.
It could become quite awkward for them if they become a winning team.
Well, I mean, there is talk, isn't there, of Max going there?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, Fernando, sadly, I don't think the Newey effect is going to have any different.
Well, he'll be 45 before he drives a Newey car, a proper Newey car, and even in the world of Fernando Alonso, where normal rules of biology appear not to apply, you can't hold it back forever.
No.
So it'll be really interesting to see. I wonder also. I mean, if you were Adrian Newey, and Adrian wants Constructors' Championships as much as anybody else, would you not just sort of say, just before I sign on this dotted, just talk to me about the people who are going to be driving my cars? He'd have an interest in that.
You'd want to know.
Yeah,
absolutely. You'd want to know. Yeah, I can see Max going there.
Wow.
It's all very, very interesting at the moment. This is what I love. When F1 gets static, and one team or one driver's winning everything, you just think, oh, I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
But now the intrigue is just pouring out of it. It's just fantastic. Let's stick with Aston Martin.
Yeah.
For the time being.
Oh, where are we going? Oh, road cars.
Road cars.
Yeah, someone's now going to write in or ring in or do something and say the Aston Martin road car team and the Formula 1 team, they're not the same. And we know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's actually
we're on that.
It's actually a sort of branding exercise, isn't it?
Well, I mean, given that, except that Lawrence Stroll is the bigger shareholder in both organisations.
So that's the connection.
That's the connection. Yeah. So they both hang from the same tree.
It's worth making that point because it's absolutely true. It's not like Ferrari.
No, it's not.
Those two are indivisible, aren't they?
Yeah.
At Maranello.
Yeah.
It's not so with Aston Martin. Anyway, Aston Martin road car. So new Vantage. A lot of hype around this car. When Andrew English drove it on the launch a few months ago, and he reviewed it for us.
Yeah,
he really sang its praises. 9 out of 10.
Yeah,
in his road test.
Yeah,
Sutcliffe did the video for us on the launch.
Mm-hmm.
He said he would have one over the 911 Turbo.
Yeah.
Which is a big call.
Yeah.
And so we had to go and see, didn't we, for ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, I'd already done a piece on the website and app now where I just went and drove it for a weekend. Thought not dissimilar things. But you never really know, do you?
No, you don't. You can't tell.
Until you get them on the road with the opposition.
You can't tell. So we did it.
Not for sure.
And our story will be live in a matter of hours. Or if you're listening to this anytime after Tuesday morning, it's live now.
Yeah.
We did the group test, Porsche 911 Turbo S, McLaren Artura, Aston Martin Vantage.
Yeah.
It's about the toughest test we could imagine for the new Aston.
The toughest test.
Yeah.
There's no point putting... We did think about, for instance, getting an AMG along. But we kind of knew what the outcome was.
Yeah, you've had a good go in that car, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had a good go in that car. And it's fine as far as it goes, but it just wasn't going to stand up to that level of scrutiny. And it would have just been another car, and its purpose would have been ill-defined, and ultimately we just thought it was better just with the three of them.
Yeah, the three of them, and it also gives us rear engine, mid engine, front engine.
Yes.
It's a very, very compelling test,
yeah.
And we're not going to give away the answer here.
No.
Sorry, you're going to have to go and check out the story if you want to know.
Yeah.
The video is coming in a few days. It's a quick.
One thing I will say, we're not going to pull a punch.
No.
There will be a victor.
Absolutely.
And a loser. And one in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not going to be one of those dreadful horses for courses.
No, it's not.
Verdicts that you often read elsewhere. We don't do that.
We don't like those.
No.
So from Aston Martin to Jaguar, and we're not going to get too drawn into this because in the next episode of the podcast we really are going quite deep on Jaguar and a couple of other marques. But we published a news story last week about the Jaguar concept car that we're going to see in December.
Yeah.
And it doesn't preview a specific model, but it previews the forthcoming design language and the production models that are to follow over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
We know that the cars that will end up in showrooms will cost between £90,000 and £140,000. We know they'll be EVs. The first, which we'll see towards the end of next year, is essentially a rival to the Porsche Taycan. Apparently, there will not be an SUV in the lineup because Land Rover builds those. But it does seem likely, Richard Bremner, who wrote that news story for us, speculated that there'll be some sort of sleek, high-riding thing.
It'll be a pure Sangue type thing, won't it?
That sort of thing, I would have thought.
It'll be something which...
They just can't not, given the way the market goes.
Role.
Yeah. But it might well be that the third in the lineup is a purely sporting thing. There's no confirmation of that. That's a bit of speculation, but that's what I would do, I think.
Yes, I mean, so this concept. Okay, what I want to know is whether it's because most concept cars these days are actually just a way of previewing the production car. When McLaren showed their concept of the P1. Back in 2013, 12?
12, I think, yeah.
It wasn't a concept car at all. They needed a concept car, but they didn't have one. All they had was a production prototype. So they actually showed the production car, put a few little bits on it, and called it a concept car. So it wasn't. So normally you go concept car, and then from that you derive the production car. They couldn't do that because they didn't have a concept car. So they had a production car, which they then kind of pretended was a concept car, and we didn't know that what we were looking at was the real deal.
Real thing, yeah.
Because they called it a concept,
and it looked amazing enough, sort of show carish enough, didn't it?
Well, it did. It just looked so bonkers. Yeah. And in fact, we know that there's going to be a new P1.
Yeah, that's coming soon, isn't it?
Soon. In fact, I'm going to go and look at it soon. Sometime this month in September, but it'll probably all be embargoed and I won't be able to talk about it. But the moment I do, we'll be on the podcast to tell you about it.
They can't call it P2, can they?
Well, it's really infuriating. We were working with someone, weren't we, on this Aston who knows exactly what it's going to be called. And he's clearly been NDA'd up the bloody wazoo because he wasn't saying anything, was he?
Didn't tell us a thing. No, fair play to him. He's very discreet.
Can't call it P0 because that's a tyre.
Yeah.
P2... ain't working,
but also
is it?
F1 P1, so maybe it's another letter and a 1, but I just don't know what letter works. T1? No. A1? That's a bit naff.
Yeah. Don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe they're probably going to have to drop that naming strategy, aren't they? Jaguar then. So it is very, very interesting, or it's going to be very, very interesting to see this new concept car and get a sense of where Jaguar is going.
Yeah.
Certainly with the design, the appearance of these forthcoming models.
What I just hope is it isn't one of those things which looks so amazing and outlandish and impossible to produce.
Yeah.
That when you see the actual one, however great it looks, you just go, oh, all right. Because it just doesn't look anything like as dramatic as spectacular. I think that's a real mistake that manufacturers have made in the past. Less so these days, but they still do it, where they produce an incredible looking concept car and we all go, wow. And then the production one comes along and you go, oh, all right.
I know nothing. I haven't seen anything more than anyone else. But I have quite high hopes for this. I think there's a lot of talent there. I think the concept is going to look pretty special.
I've heard so many different things.
Really?
I've heard people go, it's going to absolutely drop your jaw to the floor.
Yeah.
I've heard other people go, well, yeah, it's interesting, but it doesn't quite work.
Really?
I've heard such a range of opinion. I haven't seen it. I don't know. It's going to be bold. I think we can say that. And we're not talking about the concept now. We're actually talking about the real thing.
Yeah.
Whenever it comes, whenever we see it, it is going to be bold. It's not, and I think that in itself is a step in the right direction, because as we have said so many times, Jaguar is only Jaguar when it leads. The moment it starts to try to do, however well designed, and something like an XE or an XF, beautifully designed cars.
Yeah.
But they're just trying to be 3 Series and 5 Series.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah.
And the problem is if you try to be almost as good as BMW, people will still buy their BMWs. If you are as good as BMW, people will still buy the BMWs. You've got to lead. And if you look at all the Jaguars in history, and I've said this before, from the XK120 to the E-Type to the Mark II to the XJ6, even the I-Pace, which when it came out, those are the cars on which Jaguar's built its reputation. Those are the Jaguars that they remember, and they all have one thing in common, is none of them followed the pack. So here's hoping this one doesn't either. Let's
see. So the rest of the existing range has more or less been culled.
Gone.
The F-Pace lives on for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So that there's something.
Yeah, there are you can still buy an F-Type, but it's out of production.
They're
just getting rid of the stock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they call this a fire break. Get rid of the old models, have a gap, introduce the new ones.
Yeah.
I just think this is a really exciting time for Jaguar, and actually we're gonna spend a bit of time quite soon, sort of reminding ourselves and everybody else just how storied this mark is, what it's achieved in the past, what it is capable of.
Yeah.
Because it's a hell of a mark, Jaguar. It's got a great legacy.
Yeah.
And that needs to be remembered as it reinvents itself and moves forward into this exciting new future.
No, let's hope so. I do worry about it.
Interesting. Okay. So over the weekend, and after 22 years, which is just extraordinary to think of, the last ever Grand Tour film was released.
Yeah.
On Amazon Prime. So Top Gear became the Grand Tour. Certainly with Clarkson, Hammond and May. And for 22 years, those three have been knocking about together, entertaining us loosely around the topic of cars.
Yeah.
And now it's no more.
Yeah.
This is really significant, particularly for me, because it was that early studio era Top Gear. It's from 2001, 2002. I was 15, 16, so very, very impressionable.
Yeah.
And watching it absolutely confirmed to me that I wanted to be in the business of writing and talking about cars.
Yeah,
it was that show.
I think it was to your generation what Car Magazine in the 1970s was to mine, in a very different way, because it was much more generalist and mainstream. But the way that it's communicated to people of a certain age, and if you think of all the things that happened as a result, not just what they went on to go and do, but all the other TV programs and all the. I mean, I just think the entire landscape of motoring media would be completely different without it. And I think that we all, whether you like the individuals or not, whether you think that the program was silly or whatever. I mean, I think just in terms of its cultural influence around the world, let's not forget that either. I think we all owe them a debt of thanks, because I'm sure they didn't do it thinking, oh gosh, the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to. I mean, I'm sure they hoped that they would inspire a new generation, but I think they're doing it because they can earn a lot of money and have a lot of fun doing it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it has been the single greatest influence on car culture of this generation, perhaps any generation.
Yeah, no,
the world over.
No question. There's no question. And when James May sat there, a few months ago and came on the podcast, he lamented the fact that there would be no car show on sort of mainstream television anymore.
It's incredible, isn't it?
There's tons of really good stuff on YouTube, and hopefully we contribute a little bit to that.
Yeah.
But nothing on television anymore. Top Gear's dead in the water, it seems.
Fifth Gear's out there, isn't it?
Fifth Gear's coming back, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's true.
Yeah.
That's true, with some great guys and girls on that show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fifth Gear, absolutely right.
But it's
we were spoiled for choice.
It's not the global phenomenon that Top Gear was. Even after, when Chris and Paddy and Fred were doing it, it was still a worldwide, global thing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing anywhere near that now.
There were reports that suggested that Amazon was going to keep the Grand Tour going with new presenters. Not totally unconfirmed.
I mean, okay, let's say they ring you up and they go, Dan, we've seen you on YouTube. We think you're a bit handy in front of a camera. I mean, but would you do it? I mean, how do you follow that act? I mean, thanks to my fantastic face for radio, I'm the last person they're going to ask, but I wouldn't do it. I mean, because how are you going to do anything other than torpedo your career? Because you're never going to be, I don't know.
Well, Chris Harris was on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of weeks ago, talking about exactly this, but with Top Gear. And he said, and I think he sort of backtracked a little bit on it later on, but he said that he regretted it.
Doing Top Gear? I wonder whether that was because of the way that it all turned out.
Yeah.
And I know that, he's had a pretty torrid time since it ended. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I think that Chris is actually, and I'm not just saying this because he's a mate of ours, I think he's the exception to that general rule that I would put up because, unlike me, I think that is a world in which he was born to be because he is such a gifted communicator in front of a camera. And on top of that, and unlike so many people who have presented Top Gear, in the post-May Hammond-Clarkson era, actually knows what he's talking about and can really drive. I think that if ever there was anybody who could follow their footsteps, it's Chris.
I think that's absolutely right.
And that's why he was the last man standing from the original, post-Clarkson Hammer May lineup. And if even he is coming out of it going, kind of wish I hadn't done it, doesn't bode well. But then again, I think an awful lot of that is tied up with the processes at the BBC, which he's talked about, so we can talk about. And maybe it wasn't so much the idea of making car programs, but making car programs in that environment and in that way that was a particular problem. But no, I wouldn't want to follow Clarkson Hamilton May.
No. It feels like a hiding to nothing.
It's not going to be a problem I'm going to face.
No, we probably don't need to concern ourselves with that too much, do we?
But there'll be so many people who will be gagging to do it.
Oh, lining up for it.
Lining up.
Absolutely. They'll view it as their ticket to fame and fortune, won't they?
But the problem is that if there was anybody out there who really could do it, they'd probably be sitting there thinking, I don't want to do it.
That's the paradox.
Because, are you going to put it all on the line for that? And they probably think, well, probably not.
No, I agree. So the final Grand Tour. Zimbabwe, one for the road?
One for the road.
Actually, one of the interesting points about the show is that they ended up in Botswana, heavily referencing what they referred to as their first special, the Africa special, where they drove the Lancia Beta Coupe. Was that Clarkson's car? Beta Coupe?
Beta Coupe and a Mercedes and Oliver.
And Oliver was a...
I'm hoping you're going to tell me.
Oh, God. I could remember what it was when I was watching One for the Road. Now I can't.
Well, it was an Austin or something. Was it an Austin or it was some British?
Yeah, some little British thing. I can't remember.
No,
I can't remember.
Sort of thing you usually look at me and go, "What was it?"
Yeah,
and I know the answer.
People will be screaming at us. Maybe I can just quickly Google that. But it was interesting that they ended up in Botswana, and they heavily referenced that special, which they said was their first. I'm not sure that's quite true. Was it their first? Maybe not their first adventure.
Yeah.
But maybe it was the first
standalone. Yeah, but
Opel Cadet.
Opel Cadet. Yes, it wasn't a Austin at all.
No.
Oops.
Thank God for Google, eh?
But they actually, they'd obviously persuaded someone at the BBC to lend them some old footage of the two of them.
That was nice, wasn't it?
And we can't go on about this too long because there'll be a lot of people listening to this and go, well, I haven't got Amazon Prime, so I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not interested. But I think that the three of them are important enough in general car culture, just for us to talk about it a little bit. I thought going back to Sub-Saharan Africa was a bit too easy. Doing a journey, I thought. I mean, and I think it was probably reflective of the problem that they had. And I'm sure one of the Clarkson said that one of the reasons he didn't want to do the show anymore was because he had no interest in electric cars. I think another is they'd probably been to most of the places that they could be. And I think the fact that they ended up taking, three old sports cars on a journey across, some fairly inhospitable terrain, again.
It's a tried and tested formula.
It's a tried and tested formula. But I think two things about it. I think that there was nothing in it really, which we hadn't seen before. But at the same time, I think they did it beautifully well. I thought it was a really fitting end. I think they particularly did the ending of it very well. And yeah, it was a great couple of hours.
And it was a couple of hours. It's full feature length, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was saying it's interesting that they referenced the Botswana special because I think whether or not that was the first special or their first adventure, I remember watching that when it went out originally and being really blown away by it because I hadn't seen anything quite like that on television before around cars. And I was just stunned, raptured, I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And of course, the more they do it, the more familiar that kind of conceit becomes, the less it has an impact on you. And so the Zimbabwe special was really good, but it's not that sort of profound moment where you think, oh my God, this is totally different. And it just can't be, can it? No. And that's probably why they had to bring it into
and that's why the whole thing needs reinventing by some really creative people who just go about it in a completely different way. I can remember James telling me, I think it was from the Botswana thing, years ago, that the size of the crew that they had on it and the petrol stations were so few and far between that every time one car needed fueling, they'd just fuel everything because they didn't know where the next stop was. And it could take up to 3 hours.
Oh, my God.
Literally, at one petrol station because everything. And I think the other thing that I would say, and this applies as much to the Top Gear specials as to the Grand Tour specials, is that although clearly there's quite a lot of smoke and mirrors and quite a lot of artifice, it's not. I think some people think that the whole thing is just a puppet show, and the boys just get parachuted in for their pieces to camera and then whisked away in private helicopters to 10-star hotels. It's they do go there and they do it, and what you see, James, what did he say? He said it may not be real, but it is true.
Yeah, what they say about WWE wrestling is that it's fixed, not fake.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it has to be that way, doesn't it? It has to be an entertaining piece of television.
It has to be, yeah.
They have to cut out all the tedious stuff. Of course they do. Yeah. There has to be a story.
And there are bits, if you think about it, for any moment at all, that they're in some moment of great peril, and there just happens to be a drone in the sky filming all that. You just obviously know that it's all set up. But to me, that doesn't, it's a whole thing about willing suspension, isn't it? Every film you watch is a creation.
Yeah.
And that to me doesn't spoil the enjoyment at all.
So which of the specials, I'll put you on the spot here, which of the specials really leaps out at you? I'll give you one while you think, if you like.
I can tell you what the worst one was.
Go on. India.
Yeah.
That's what they got the balance wrong there, where it's too obviously constructed.
Yeah.
And
they did one in Burma. Did they go to Burma?
I can't remember. They did Vietnam on the bikes. That's
Vietnam
good.
on the bikes. That was
very
really good. Yeah.
The best one for me is North Pole. Taking that Hilux to the North Pole.
Magnetic
North Pole. Okay.
They didn't.
Is that a big difference?
Oh my God.
Is it?
They didn't go to the North Pole.
Okay. Magnetic North Pole. So how far were they from the North Pole?
Well, they never got out of Canada.
What? Is that right?
Yeah, but okay. Sorry, that sounds really mean, doesn't it?
I had no idea.
Okay, the magnetic North Pole
Yeah.
moves all the time.
Right.
It's always somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay?
Can you explain why?
Soon after my physics O level, I could probably explain. In fact, I did read about it recently because I was reading about someone going and finding the magnetic North Pole for the first time. I can't remember, but it does move all the time.
Yeah.
But usually speaking, it's nowhere near the North Pole. Most of the time, it's in northern Canada.
Wow.
And you think to yourself, oh, well, fine, so they just drove there and the whole thing. Absolutely not. I mean...
It's still a trip, isn't it?
Oh,
still
my
an
God.
Yeah,
yes. And it was still, I think they were still the first car of any kind to get to the magnetic North Pole. Yeah. So I don't, although I feel the need, just for the point of historical accuracy, to point out that they didn't go to the North Pole.
Yeah, it's not to diminish
which is a fixed place.
Yeah, yeah.
They went to the magnetic North Pole. That is in no way to diminish their achievement, because what they did was go somewhere which no car had ever been to before. And they made an amazing film doing it. And, fair play.
Yeah, I think
and you're right. It was actually absolutely far and away the best of them.
It was brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was absolutely brilliant. And there were moments, and I don't know if this is real jeopardy or constructed for television, but moments when they're driving in that Hilux over sheet ice and you hear it apparently cracking underneath them, and you genuinely want to hide behind the sofa and just think they're going to go in.
Yeah.
But that's the power of good television, isn't it?
Fantastic television.
You just believe it. You know they didn't go in because it would have been in the news.
Yeah.
But you're watching it thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's a mystery to me, how that works. That really is a mystery. So yeah, I'm going to miss these shows. And actually a big part of it is, in many ways, and for a long time, the cars have almost been sort of incidental. And a big part of what they've been producing all these years is travel television and taking us to these amazing places.
Yeah.
But doing it in a fun way, in a way that I can relate to because they're driving.
But it's a sitcom, isn't it? It's men behaving badly for middle-aged guys, and that's why so many people who have no interest in cars love watching it, because they just love watching Clarkson, Hammond, and May cock about, and the fact that they happen to be doing it in cars is that's just sort of set decoration. It is men behaving badly, retold for middle-aged blokes.
Yeah,
great.
Last of the summer petrol. So someone at some point is going to reboot Top Gear or the Grand Tour.
Do you know, I hope there's a pause.
Oh, there needs to be
because
I
think
pause.
if anybody just tries to do it now,
yeah,
it's almost doomed to failure, because the comparison is just, how could you possibly withstand that level of scrutiny? So I think the whole thing just needs to subside for a few years.
Oh, years and years. Yeah, it really does.
And then some really how they're going to do it in the EV landscape that will exist by then, I don't know. But there will be a will for it. There will be a demand for it, and so someone's going to do it. And it's happened before, so it'll happen again.
It will. It will. We shall see. Well, listen, we need to wrap this one up. But before we disappear, I will just remind you all that you can use coupon code POD15 at checkout to get a 15% discount on your subscription to the Intercooler. It's the best way to help the show, to support the show. It means we keep doing it. We can keep going bigger and better. You also, in doing so, get full access to our online car magazine.
Which is extraordinary.
Do you know what? I was looking back through it the other day, reading some comments and just thinking, blimey, people who subscribe to this like it.
Yeah, they do.
We need to make a bit more of that, really, because it is extraordinary, the response that we get.
Yeah.
So if you want to support the show, that's the way to do it. Subscribe to the Intercooler, get a 15% discount, POD15 at checkout. Just go to the-intercooler.com or click the link in the description. And thank you ever so much to everyone who has done that so far. Sincerely, we really appreciate it.
Yep.
And make sure you tune in again next week.